Genevieve Waller, she, her, and I guess that's my website up there. Yeah, I'm a visual artist. I'm also a writer. I also curate exhibitions. I'm totally devoted to the field of visual art, and I guess, yeah, you want to put on the first slide? Okay, so I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas. It's my hometown. My parents both grew up there. But for the last 11 years, I've lived in Denver, Colorado, which is a wonderful place to be an artist. The art scene there, so diverse, very supportive. Other artists want to see you succeed. And this is a photo of me in my very first art studio in Denver, a place called The Temple, a former Jewish temple that was a rave party place for a while. And in the last 10 years, it's been artist studios. My background is in art history and darkroom photography, but the last 15 years I've been doing a lot of sculpture, particularly with fiber. And in this image, I'm wearing one of my pieces made with scrubbing sponges, and it's a medium I'm still working with today. My studio mate took this photo, so you kind of get a sense of, I also make cameraless photographs that are on the wall, and I'll talk about those later. So here are some examples of the sponge sculptures. The one on the bottom left is the one I was wearing. So these come in 5 colors, actually now only 4 colors. I was telling some other people they're not making pink anymore. And I'm interested in the way that, these are tools of domestic labor, usually women's labor, scrubbing the toilets, scrubbing the dishes. And I've been working with kind of a series of ideas about small protests in the home where you take something meant for labor and make it unusable, and take something that has kind of a low status and bring it up to art status. So these are all made with scrubbing sponges that I've cut in different shapes and sewn together, all hand sewn. So it's sort of like hand sewing clothes or a quilt, like our great grandmothers did before sewing machines were invented. I'm interested in that kind of laborious process too, and repetitive, obsessive, meditative. There's a lot of art processes that are like that, knitting for sure, but interested in bringing that into the fine art realm. I've also been doing a series of soft sculptures, and it seems like the pretzel has become one of my iconic images that I've been working with. When I make photograms, I like to use objects that are very recognizable, because a photogram sort of turns objects into a silhouette or an X-ray, and then black becomes white, white becomes black. Things get abstracted, but if you use objects that have highly recognizable silhouettes, you can still read them as such, and the pretzel is an unmistakable silhouette. I like them too because they're sort of humorous, and I'm interested in the history of soft sculpture. If you look into it, a lot of people credit Klaus Oldenburg, but he was not the first one. It was, of course, women who did it first. Klaus Oldenburg's first wife, Patty Musha, she's the one who sewed all of his early soft sculptures in the 60s. And she and he were inspired by Yayoi Kusama. Most people know Kusama. She's become internationally known. She was making all kinds of soft sculpture in the 60s. And then there's another artist who lives in Colorado, actually, but she was in England in the early 60s, a pop artist there named Jan Haworth, also making soft sculpture. So if you're interested in that history, look into it. I can talk to you about it more too, but I'm interested in being part of that lineage of women making soft sculpture. And but speaking of pop art, I also have used some other media. I don't know if anyone's seen kits for making jeweled fruit, beaded fruit. It was sort of a popular thing in the 60s. You could buy a kit in the store. It came with a little, foam lemon and all the pins and all the beads. And you can still find the jeweled fruit and versions of, in fact, at Jentel there's a bowl of beaded fruit, but it's kind of a modern version. So I made giant beaded fruit, kind of in that, surrealist pop art tradition of take something recognizable and transform it somehow. A yellow banana, a green pear, a red cherry, but a pink lemon. I just wanted to make a pink lemon. They do exist, they're not quite this pink in real life. So yeah, transforming something every day by changing the scale and quoting this kind of craft tradition of the beaded sculptures. But I've also worked with installation as a form in addition to sculpture, and these are some pieces I've done with cellophane. So cellophane comes in many different colors and it's translucent, so you cast beautiful shadows, light goes through it, and so I was interested in making these chains, kind of like grade school chains that maybe you all made with construction paper as a way to decorate the classroom. These are with cellophane. And this particular work I started making in 2011 as part of a residency in Galesburg, Illinois. And I learned that Illinois was the first state in the US to decriminalize sodomy. And I was interested in the way these are chains, but they're totally ineffectual chains, can be broken with almost no effort. So there's a song by the band Erasure. You may or may not know Erasure from the 80s, were their heyday. There's a song called Chains of Love, and that's what I titled this piece, because that song was all about the fight for LGBTQ rights in England. Basically under Margaret Thatcher, there's a lot of intolerance, and this song is all about breaking the chains of love. And so it's part of a larger concept that I've been working with. One thing I did in Denver too that was super fun, I joined an art collective, or created an art collective with 7 other artists. We were called Secret Love Collective. We did a lot of different projects together. We walked together in the Denver Pride Parade in 2017. It's a huge Pride Parade, 100,000 people come out. And we did an alternative version. So there are a lot of, nonprofits, schools, bars, big businesses who walk in the parade, people who make incredible floats. We did kind of a DIY version where we made our own banners using vintage bed sheets and words that we cut out, and I came up with all kinds of ridiculous phrases: write your name in cursive, eat queer art for breakfast, all kinds of things where it's like slogans, but they're not really a call to action in anything that's like revolutionary or kind of small acts of revolution. So this is me when I was making that write your name in cursive banner. But yeah, I have this whole background in photography, in the darkroom, cameraless photography. And I've been making photograms since I first learned to use the darkroom, and I still make them when I have access to the darkroom. And I think these objects that I use to make photograms are the same kinds of objects I use to make sculpture. So I'm interested in these everyday objects, discarded objects, things that don't look like much, don't get a lot of attention, but by putting them in a work of art, using them to make art, you can reevaluate them and thinking about hierarchies of value and how we can see the world differently. So these are some of the most recent ones I made as part of an online residency with a place called the Land Art Collective in the UK. During 2020, 2021, they did an online residency for people. You didn't have to travel to England. In fact, you couldn't travel to England at that time because of COVID. And the theme was outer space and environmental issues in outer space. And so I learned all about, I don't know if you've heard about this, there's a giant cloud of space junk that orbits the Earth. So not only have we polluted the Earth, we've polluted space. And so as a way to, this is an image of one of those photograms, the objects I used to make it. So you might recognize these plastic rings that come around like six packs of soda or beer or whatever. I was collecting them, and they make a really lovely photogram. And lots of small objects like bath beads, and there might be a pretzel in there. Fake eyelashes, things like that. So I had this idea of imagining all that space junk being like jewelry that's like orbiting the Earth, beaded curtains. So I was making space junk jewelry and then making photograms of it. But you know, the photogram, the traditional one, everything floats in this sea of black because the paper is meant to reverse a negative. So any place that is not covered by an object turns black. So unlike a drawing, which is often on a white piece of paper and you make dark lines, photogram, everything floats in the blackness, and it is like outer space. I thought it was a good metaphor for this idea about space and exploring what's going on in outer space. So I'm from Kansas, and one of the things I learned 15 years ago is that the inventor of the rainbow flag is from Kansas. He was born in Chanute, Kansas, raised in Parsons. He was drafted into the Army during the Vietnam War, ended up in San Francisco, met Harvey Milk, created the rainbow flag, Gilbert Baker. And I was so impressed by, you know, this fellow Kansan who went on to do this, made this international symbol. I started a series of work, research and art about LGBTQ Kansans, and he's probably the most famous, but not famous in Kansas like he should be. So, in fact, next June I'm going to be doing a residency in Lindsborg, Kansas, and I'm going to work on some more projects in this series. I have some name sculptures of famous Kansans or people who I see as important. One for Gilbert Baker. You might have heard of Ruby Dandridge. She was an actor, a voice actor in Hollywood. William Inge, playwright. There's a William Inge festival every year in Kansas. His plays keep coming back on Broadway, getting revived over the years. He was active in the 50s. So it's one of my projects is to kind of raise the profile of queer Kansans from the past mostly, but contemporary too. And then lastly, I wanted just to promote this other thing I do, more related to my art history background. I put out a magazine 3 times a year from Denver, all about the Colorado Front Range art scene. And I have free copies in the back. Feel free to take one. This is the latest issue, number 14 for the fall. And it's called Daria. It's part of a lineage of people starting art magazines in their communities where they saw a need. There's one in Los Angeles called Carla, Contemporary Art Review LA. There's one in Buffalo, New York called Cornelia, named after the first director of the Albright Knox Museum, gallery there, the Big Art Museum. So Daria is following in the footsteps of these other people, starting their own art publications. And yeah, it's something I really enjoyed and helped me to, I call it my love letter to the Denver art scene, but now it's Fort Collins, Loveland, Colorado Springs, Trinidad, Pueblo. It includes a lot of different places that really interesting art is happening, and trying to promote that, get people excited about going to see shows, highlight artists who are doing important work who maybe aren't getting big museum shows that I think should be highlighted, and yeah, trying to help build the art scene to make it more connected and robust. So that is all, I think.
Questions? I thought your first outfit was probably Post-it notes.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, do they come in bright red? I don't know.
I don't know about red, but they do come in different colors.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good idea. I should maybe start working with Post-it notes a little bit.
I think your sponges are a good idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I just finished a new sponge sculpture at Jentel. Maybe we'll do a studio visits at the end and take some photos we can post.
So are you sewing by hand or using a machine or what when you make it, especially with the pretzels?
With the pretzels, I actually do sew the outside with a machine, but the inside holes, you can only do it by hand. Because if you know with sewing, you usually have 2 parts, and the finished side is inside, and you sew usually with the finish side of the fabric on the interior, but it would be impossible to turn the fabric right side out if I sewed the holes beforehand. So I have to turn outside, finish side out, and then hand sew each of the holes. So it's a combination of the two. I could do it all by hand, but it would just add more time. I decided to go with the machine on the outside.
Do you have a certain fabric that you like to deal with, or is that just a myriad of
Yeah, it's usually I'm collecting them at the thrift store. There was a wonderful place called Colorado Fabrics that I would go to that had a fabric by the pound section. That was wonderful, but sadly they closed. But yeah, I've made a lot of photograms of fabric, so I really actually love cotton twill fabrics with patterns. They make wonderful photograms because the light passes through them easily. And I usually press them onto the paper with a piece of glass. So in the photographic image, you can actually see the weave of the fabric because it catches all that detail with the light passing through. So yeah, that's often my favorite.
So is a photogram similar to a cyanotype, except?
Definitely, it's all part of the same kind of process. Yeah, cyanotype is just using a different chemical, and it's that kind of chemical is sensitive to UV light, sunlight, whereas darkroom stuff it's sensitive to all light except with black and white paper, red, yellow. That's why the safe lights, if you've ever been in darkroom, are red or yellow because the paper isn't sensitive to that spectrum of light. But color, if you've ever been in a color darkroom, that paper is sensitive to everything. So you have to do everything in darkness. So you become very good at finding objects in the dark. But anyway, okay. Oh yeah.
You also do traditional photography?
With a camera?
Yeah.
I have, yeah. And in fact, a few years ago, I was shooting black and white, 35 millimeter for a project. Film is coming back, don't you think? It's getting more prominent again, which is wonderful. But there's certain film stocks and papers that are gone forever, so that's sad. Yeah.
Do you do functional, or I guess I'd say functional sewing at all?
Oh, like sewing my own clothes?
That kind of thing?
Probably the most I do is mending. I mend my clothes. My studio mate, she sews all her own clothes. Her mom is the president of the board of the Rocky Mountain Quilt Museum. She has this whole, so if I need something more, I get her help. Yeah. Cool, thank you.